Hello, everybody. I'm Shruti Ramanujam and I'm from the Exchange Reporter Plus team of Manage Engine. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend today's workshop. It really means a lot to us here at Manage Engine because we understand that you guys will be a little busy. So just the fact that you were able to take time out of your schedules to attend today's workshop is something that I would really like to appreciate. So thanks a lot for that. Today's webinar will just take a really small amount of your time. I'm hoping to finish the webinar in maybe the next half an hour to 45 minutes. So I hope you are able to get something out of the webinar once we're done today. So today's topic is going to be all about compliance. The topic is actually how you can ensure compliance in an exchange environment. So we will be discussing the minimum requirements of popular compliance mandates that you would need to comply with if you work with or if you are a US organization. So we will be looking at that today. But before we go any further, I'll just let you know about one thing. If you have any issues with the audio or if seeing the screen is kind of a problem for you, you can always let us know. So if you see the chat box on your screen, you can use that to reach out to us. Just send it through the questions pane if you are not able to listen to the audio clearly. If you are experiencing any difficulties, you can always let us know through chat. And I'm also keeping an eye on the chat box and I don't see any questions so far. So I'm going to assume that the audio is perfectly all right for everyone who is attending today's workshop. So in addition to that, there's another thing that you should all know. If you have any questions, you can always reach out through the chat box that you see on your screen and I will get back to you immediately. And Shiva from our support team is also keeping an eye on the chat box. So one of us will always reach out to you. If he doesn't, or if I don't look at your questions during the webinar, I'll definitely stay on for maybe 5 minutes I mean 5 minutes after the webinar is done so that I can address any questions that you may have. So you don't have to worry if you don't get an answer immediately. Yeah. So there's that. Coming back to today's topic, it's all about compliance and exactly how exactly an exchange administrator can ensure compliance in their exchange environment. So a lot of organizations these days they're definitely looking at compliance because it is something that also decides the reputation of the organization. So if you say you are compliant with a popular regulatory mandate and industry standard, you are automatically going to get a good standing in your clients' minds, in your customers' minds. So compliance is of course something that everyone's discussing these days. As an administrator, you need to know exactly what mandates you can help your organization comply with when you use Exchange for Business emails, because this is something that's not talked about a lot, but it really needs to be talked about. So that's why we are doing today's webinar. And of course, another disclaimer that I would like to add is this: how exactly you are going to comply with the popular mandate is up to your auditors. It is up to the people who assess the security of your organization. I am just going to give you a bunch of best practices. So I'm just going to give you an introduction to some of the popular compliance mandates, and I will also be telling you some of the best practices that you can follow when it comes to these particular mandates. So there's that. So without further ado, let's move on to the agenda for today. So the agenda is this. I'm going to tell you which popular mandates also cover emails. Spoiler alert, it's most of the famous ones because they talk about data handling a lot. And if a mandate is talking about data handling, it also includes emails because you are exchanging confidential data via emails. So this refers to emails too when it comes to data handling. In addition to this, we will also be looking at what the minimum requirements of each compliance mandate is. So if there are any particular verticals of organizations that need to comply with that particular mandate, I will be mentioning it. So this is how the webinar will go. I will show you one particular mandate. I will tell you exactly what it is in maybe a sentence or two, and then I'll tell you which sector or which vertical of organizations need to comply with this particular mandate, and I will move on to a slide that shows you all the things you need to do in your Exchange environment in order to stay compliant with these particular mandates if you are trying to become compliant to those standards. And then I will, in a very short format, I will also give you certain best practices that you can follow. And this is in relation to compliance. It won't be about any particular industrial standard, but it will in general be about compliance and some best practices that help you comply with any standard, basically. And finally, I will be, and this will go on only for the last 5 minutes of this webinar. It will be a quick sales pitch, but I'm sure you won't be as annoyed about it because the whole webinar is going to be about the domain. So towards the last 5 minutes, I will be talking about Exchange Reporter Plus and more importantly, how it helps you pass compliance audits. So it'll just be a quick demo about Exchange Reporter Plus. I'll probably stay or show you the tool for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. That's all. So just bear with me. And this will only happen towards the end of the webinar. But for now, all we're going to do is get a quick introduction about the compliance mandates and then see what you need to do in your Exchange environment in order to assess compliance. So that is the agenda for today. So let's move on to the actual topics that we will be looking at. And the very first topic is about the mandates that cover emails. And as I mentioned earlier, there are quite a number of popular mandates, especially for the American organizations that help you that are necessary to be complied with if you use Exchange for business emails. But before that, we need to know why exactly this topic is relevant. And you might have guessed it already, but emails are an integral part of every business because all we do to communicate with each other in our workplace is via emails. A lot of us, most of the conversations that we have with our co-workers are going to be through emails. So emails are going to be carrying a lot of confidential data. So if there is a data breach or if a rogue user gains access to an important mailbox, these are all situations where the unauthorized individual can gain access to confidential data that was not meant for their eyes. So that's why email security needs to be established. And in addition to that, there's the industry mandates which say that you need to ensure email security, right? So it's a win-win because you get to be compliant to a particular mandate that increases your image with your customers, and you are also ending up securing your email data. So that you're going to get two things out of this, and that is definitely a good thing. And finally, you also need to ensure that you are compliant with certain policies in order to avoid the penalties that go with non-compliance. So most of you must be familiar with the GDPR, and you know what the cost of non-compliance with the GDPR is, right? It costs about 4% of your global turnover. You need to give it in the form of penalties, yeah. So that is something that you can avoid if you take the measures, if you make sure that there are measures in place in order to be compliant with certain mandates that your organization needs to comply with. So what exactly are the mandates, the popular mandates that organizations usually look for? It's these. And if you are trying to become compliant with any of these five mandates, there are certain things that you need to do in your Exchange environment. And I've chosen just the popular mandates because we mostly have an audience today of people who work for American organizations, maybe, and of course the GDPR is for people from the European Union. So we have people from there too. But in addition to this, there are certain famous mandates for the people attendees we have from South Africa. You must obviously be familiar with POPI, POPI. So we also help you become compliant with the POPI Act, and I will be getting into that later. It won't happen in this webinar, but that is is something that we can definitely discuss. And we always have seminars in place. I think we have one that's going to be happening in a few weeks in South Africa, in Cape Town, and in Johannesburg, which is going to be about the POPI Act, POPI. So regional mandates such as this, we won't be focusing on those in this particular webinar, but if you need any help with respect to those mandates, or if you'd like to see how the products from Manage Engine help you comply with any of those acts, you can always reach out to us. Yeah, my email address is also present in this presentation. It's just shruti@manageengine.com, and I will also show it to you in a while. Towards the end of the webinar, I'll tell you what my email address is. You can always reach out to me, and I will let you know how our organization can help you comply with certain mandates. I can also put you in touch with compliance experts from our organization for other tools that help you comply with any popular mandate from your region. But for today, these are the mandates that we will be discussing. So let's move on. Let's go into detail about all these compliance mandates. We are going to see how what the minimum requirements of these 5 mandates are, and what exactly you can do in your exchange environment to assess if you are compliant with these mandates. So the very first compliance that we are going to look at is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, or SOX. So SOX is again a United States federal law, and I think it was first introduced in order to protect investors from accounting errors and any fraudulent financial activities. To stop those from happening, the United States federal law SOX was passed. So this Act, or the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, is primarily about safeguarding financial data, as I've mentioned. So if you are an organization that deals with finance, if your vertical, the vertical of your organization is finance, this is definitely something that you need to comply with. And another important thing to note about the Sarbanes-Oxley Act is that it's not directly related to emails. So why exactly are we discussing this now? So, SOX, it may not be directly related to emails, but it does say that organizations should retain any information. It actually says that companies must control, protect, and retain financial data. They must retain financial data and related files, so that if public disclosure needs to be done, you are already holding on to the financial information. So, disclosure is going to become easier. So that is one of the rules of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And if financial data is going to be transmitted via emails in your organization, then of course it does relate to emails in a way. It doesn't specifically mention emails, but you do need to retain any information related to financial information and financial data. And if your emails contain that, you need to ensure that you are holding on to that. So that's one thing about SOX. It also includes provisions about data security and access control. Data security and access control. So say there's the finance team in your organization and you want just a select few people to have access to their mailboxes. So you just want the owners and trusted delegates of those mailboxes to have access to them. Yeah, and if some unscrupulous user, or if someone inadvertently gains access to that particular mailbox, an important mailbox, anything can happen. So someone could inadvertently forward an important email, or it could be a rogue user who in general wants to do something destructive in your organization. So you need to make sure that there's data security. You need to secure your data, ensure that you have access control measures in place. So those are provisions. So this indirectly relates to emails too. IT infrastructure auditing. I'm just going to say that this has to do with your mailboxes too. And finally, change management. If someone gives access, so I was talking about an important mailbox. So say an administrator gives the wrong person access to a particular mailbox, or if he changes the permissions of a person. So if a person has just read-only access and he is given full access permissions over a particular mailbox, this person can do anything. They can read the emails, they can forward emails, they can delete emails. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily going to happen only to the rogue users in your organization, but you definitely don't want other users to have access. You need to manage changes. Change management is something that needs to happen in your organization, and change auditing is also something that needs to happen. So these are all the requirements that the SOX has that also indirectly relate to emails. So in a way, if you are an exchange administrator, you need to make sure that you are compliant with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So that is something that we definitely need to make sure. And here are all the things. I understand that it's a pretty big slide, but here are all the things that could help you pass SOX audits. And once again, for the people who joined like 5 minutes back or something, I'm adding a disclaimer here. This depends on what your auditors say. These are just the best practices that I'm offering you in order to make sure that as an exchange administrator, you can help your organization be compliant with SOX. So the very first thing you can do is monitor user logon activity. So you can see the logon nature, you can see the trends in your organization. You can see which user accessed which user's mailbox, whether they accessed their own mailbox, whether they weren't an owner but they were a delegate, so they accessed a mailbox. You can find out which mailboxes were activated or deactivated in recent times in your organization. You can track the databases that have been mounted or dismounted. So this is another thing that's also important. Just forget compliance for a minute. I mean, you're not supposed to do that, but for the sake of today's webinar, let's put compliance aside for a minute. Dismounted databases. How many of you have actually had a problem with this? A database is inadvertently it gets dismounted and you don't notice it, and an end user probably runs into problems where they're not able to connect to their mailbox, and they will definitely flood your technical support team with calls. So in order to avoid all of this, it would be great if you knew that a store or a database was dismounted immediately. And by the way, Exchange Reporter Plus actually helps you do that, but I'll get into that in the last 5 minutes of today's webinar. So you need to know when databases are mounted or dismounted in your organization. You need to monitor user actions on Exchange databases. User actions on mailboxes are not the only things you need insight into. You also need to know what users have done with databases. If there are any failed Outlook Web Access logon attempts, you need to know, because if a number of failed attempts are, of course, they always refer to something unscrupulous. So you definitely need to know this. And in addition to this, you also need to find out if any changes have happened to mailbox storage quotas. Because if mailbox storage quotas are going to be messed with, the important users, the C-suite in your organization, is not going to be able to access their emails or access their messages. And you don't want that happening. You don't want prohibition of sending and reception of emails for the C-suite in your organization. So you need to track any changes that have happened to storage quotas or message size restrictions. And if you have a multiple administrator environment, you must already be familiar with these three, because these are all server configuration changes. You need to know if any of these have been changed by another administrator in your environment in order to make troubleshooting easier and also to comply with SOX. So these are all the things that you can do from your end in order to make sure that you stay compliant with SOX. And in general, these are a bunch of best practices that you can follow. You can use the native tools, or you can use a third-party tool such as Exchange Reporter Plus in order to make sure that you are compliant with this particular mandate. Yeah, so this is something that you can do. And another thing, again, so I'm jumping off to another topic, but kind of related to the webinar, because if you would like to receive the slide deck, you can always drop your email address through the chat box that you see on your screen, and we will always, we're most welcome. Like, we wouldn't mind sending you the slide deck if you want to take a look at these activities that help you pass these compliance audits. So that's it about SOX. Let's move on to the next compliance mandate that we are going to look at, which is HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And there are two main questions to ask here. HIPAA is basically about health. Obviously, from the expansion that you see on the screen, you definitely know that that's what HIPAA is related to. But there are two main questions that you can ask yourself in order to find out if you need to comply with HIPAA or not. Again, this is something that some of you might already be familiar with. Are you a health organization? Because if you are a hospital or any other health organization, you need to make sure that you are compliant with HIPAA, but you must already be knowing that. And another thing, another question that you can ask yourself is if you deal with health insurance. So if your answer was yes to either of these questions, you need to make sure that you are compliant with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So the HIPAA, it requires health organizations to handle medical information securely and properly. So it says that healthcare organizations should have the proper measures in place in order to have medical information security, medical information privacy. It should have data standards that help protect patient information, because patient information is actually really sensitive data and you don't really want it getting into the wrong hands, or just any hands that are not directly involved in the particular patient's treatment or diagnosis or whatever be the case, or even if it's something as simple as insurance. So these are all confidential information that not everyone should know. So this is not just for medical organizations, it also extends to other organizations that store or transmit patient data. And which kind of organizations store or transmit patient data? It's health insurance companies. So if your organization deals with health insurance companies, or if it is a health insurance company, and if you will definitely be storing and transmitting patient data, so you need to make sure that you are compliant with HIPAA. So this health data, so this is what the HIPAA says. It says that the medical information of the patient must be isolated. It must be in an inaccessible location. You do not want everyone to just dip their hands into the cookie jar. So you need to make sure that just a certain number of individuals have access to health information. Transmission of health information by email should be secure. So you need to make sure that the proper encryption is in place when you are transmitting health information via emails, because this ultimately helps you ensure confidentiality of patient data. And another thing that the HIPAA mentions, or rather doesn't mention, is that it doesn't say anything about email retention, but it does say that you need to have a preservation period of up to 6 years for health information, because you need to hold on to health information for up to 6 years. And this is going to help you if there are any complaints. So this helps you with documentation of complaints. It helps you hold on to medical records. And just in general, privacy policies and other mandates dictate that you should hold on to important confidential data for a minimum of 6 years. So emails that contain any of this kind of data, medical information, health insurance details, procedures that were done on patients, all of these emails should be secure and handled in a proper way. They should be transmitted securely. They should be handled properly. End-to-end encryption must be present in emails. So these are all the things that you can do from your end in order to ensure that you are not causing a HIPAA violation in your organization. And in addition to that, there are a few other things that you can assess. If you have an internal assessment in your organization, these are all the things that you can make sure is happening in your exchange environment. You need to track non-owner mailbox logons. So a few minutes back, I said that the HIPAA needs you to put patient information in an inaccessible location, or that unauthorized users should not have access to patient information. So let's say that there is a particular important mailbox, some important person in your health organization who is dealing with health insurance in some way. And this person's emails are going to contain certain amount of personal patient data, right? So if someone other than the owner gains access to this particular mailbox, and this person is not an owner, this person is not a trusted delegate, but they have access to this particular mailbox. So if this happens, this person can do whatever they want in the particular mailbox, right? So you need to know when non-owner mailbox logons happen in your organization. You need to figure out who is trying to, going back to the reference that I made a few minutes back, you need to know if someone is dipping their hands into a cookie jar that's not exactly theirs. Yeah. So that's why you need to make sure that there are no non-owner mailbox logons happening in your organization. You need to view details about undelivered emails. So this is something that you can do next. So undelivered emails, why exactly is this important? Because someone could be claiming that they didn't receive their medical bills via emails. So I'm just moving over. I'm forgetting HIPAA for a minute and just consider this as a general best practice. If someone's claiming this, you can always make sure, or you can always check on whether the mails were delivered or not. So you need to check out if a mail containing important information was delivered or not. And this, in a roundabout way, is also going to help you comply with HIPAA. You can check the traffic of messages sent and received by users. So this is not directly going to help you pass HIPAA audits, but you can see what kind of messages were sent and received by users, because you can keep track of subject lines. So again, this is something that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you with. You can audit deleted or moved emails, and this is important because once again, I spoke about data retention and more importantly, email retention. So if any email containing important health data has been deleted or moved, you need to know, and this needs to be audited. This needs to be present in a report. You need to show the auditors that, okay, yeah, we know that this happened. This has been logged in our reports. And then you should also know what kind of messages are being exchanged in your organization and which of those are containing confidential information. So these are all the things that you can do from your end as an exchange administrator in order to become compliant with certain mandates. And once again, I'm just talking about the exchange aspects of these compliance policies. I'm not going into all the other aspects that they will definitely have, like looking at the logs, server auditing, and so on. The next compliance mandate that we are going to look at is actually important for most organizations. So the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. So this is for any organization that transmits credit card or debit card information via emails. So if your organization is involved in any kind of payment card transaction, you need to listen to what's going on right now, because you need to be compliant with PCI DSS. You may already be compliant with the PCI DSS, but here's how PCI DSS relates to the exchange environment. So if you deal with payment card transactions, you need to make sure that there is a secure environment that helps, secure environment through which customers can transact. So you need to have a secure environment so that customers can keep or they can exchange information in a secure way, and in a way that prevents any kind of security breaches. So you need access control measures in place in your organization so that you can reduce the risk of security breaches. So that's exactly why you need PCI DSS. If you use payment card transactions in any way, you need to listen up right now. And how, as an exchange admin, can you pass a PCI DSS audit? You need to audit changes to mailbox permissions. So I said access control was really important. So if some unknown user, this could be an honest user in your organization, or it could also be a rogue user. So if this unknown user suddenly has permissions over important information, or mailboxes that contain emails that have information about payment card transactions. So if this honest or rogue user has access to this particular important information, it's not really good for you. Yeah, because you are trying to make your reputation sound good, or to sound strong, and you don't want things like this happening in your organization. So you need to make sure that no random users have access or have permissions over particular mailboxes, which is why you need to audit all the changes that are happening to mailbox permissions in your organization. So that's something that you need to do. And then you need to track the permissions based on mailboxes and users. So not only do you need to audit the kind of permission changes that have happened in your organization, you also need to look at what permissions Active Directory users and groups have over mailboxes. And another thing, locate messages by keywords in their subject or body, because if you want to find out what kind of messages are being exchanged in your organization with payment card details, you can always do that, and this is something that you can do using Exchange Reporter Plus. Detect failed logon attempts and see what emails were sent to or received from external domains. What kind of payment card transactions could have happened with external email domains? These are all the things that you can do in order to make sure that you are compliant with PCI DSS. Let's move on to the next compliance mandate for the day, which is GLBA, which stands for the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. So, the first question that you need to ask yourself is this. As an organization, do you provide financial services in any way to your customers? So that is a question that you need to answer to figure out if you need to comply with the GLBA or not. So what do I mean by providing financial services? So the GLBA, Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, it applies to all financial institutions. It actually says that companies that offer financial products or services to individuals need to comply with this act. So if you provide loans, or if you provide financial or investment advice, if you help with insurance in any way, if you are a bank, or if you are a loan broker, if you are an insurance company, these are all the kinds of organizations that need to make sure that they are compliant with GLBA. So yeah, all these kinds of organizations need to comply with GLBA, and this organization says that you need to protect confidential customer data. I've mentioned it right here. Any kind of confidential customer data, you need to ensure and secure and protect it. You need to prevent non-owner access to this confidential customer data. So this non-owner access will be a recurring theme when you as an exchange administrator try to find out which acts you need to comply with, because this is something that almost every access, and GLBA in particular needs you to safeguard clients' private information. So there are a few things that you can do. You can maybe encrypt messages that contain confidential messages, and especially if you are sending this over an unprotected link, you need to control access to confidential customer data. I mentioned this already. You need to protect your email servers and network drives, because this is where the confidential information may be stored in your organization. And then you can track admin's mailbox activity. So indirectly, this is also going to help you pass GLBA audits, because if you have multiple administrators, you are just checking on what exactly they did in particular mailboxes in your organization. They could have unknowingly done something which messes up emails that contain confidential customer data. You can audit delegated mailbox activity. Non-owner mailbox activity is, of course, something that I already mentioned. Take a look at all the emails that were deleted or moved. Track the changes to mailbox permissions. Find out what permissions users and groups have over mailboxes. So based on mailboxes and based on users, what are the mailbox permissions that are available in your organization is something that you need to definitely look at in your organization. Yeah, so these are all the things that you can do in order to make sure that you are passing a GLBA audit. Encrypt, take a look at other users activities on mailboxes, control access to mailboxes that contain confidential customer information, protect your email servers, protect your network drives, ensure that if you are sending confidential data over an unprotected link, encryption has taken place. So that was the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, or GLBA, and how as an exchange administrator you can comply with GLBA. So the next or the final compliance mandate that we are going to look at is actually a pretty hot topic if you think about it. It's the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And as an exchange administrator, there are a couple of things, or maybe more than a couple of things, 3 or 4 things that you can do that also helps you on your way to GDPR compliance. So there's another thing that I'd like to mention here. This is in no way these are not the only things that are going to help you comply with the GDPR. There are actually a number of other things that you need to do in order to comply with the GDPR. And of course, we have we do have certain webinars going on from Manage Engine about GDPR. So you can always take a look at those webinars in order to find out exactly all the things that you need to do in order to comply with the GDPR. In fact, we have one tonight, and I understand, okay, it's not tonight, but it is for the GMT region. So it's for you guys at around 2 p.m. GMT. So we have one webinar going on today, which is once again about the GDPR. So this is in no way comprehensive. I'm just giving you a bunch of best practices that you can follow as an exchange administrator, but not just to comply with the GDPR in total. But anyway, let's go on. Let's talk about the GDPR. So there are two questions that you need to figure out what your answers are in order to find out if you need to comply with the GDPR. Is your company in the European Union? Or do you process EU customers' personal data in any way? Because if you answered yes to either of these questions, you need to make sure that you are GDPR compliant. So this compliance mandate will be passed or it'll come into play this May. So you need to make sure that or was it March? It could be March or May. So anyway, you need to make sure that you are compliant with the GDPR before it comes into play. So here are, let's just talk about what the GDPR is about for anyone in the audience who is not exactly sure what we're talking about. So the General Data Protection Regulation Act is all about personal data, and it is for companies that are located in the European Union or for companies that process European Union customers' personal data. So there are two things you do by complying with the GDPR. You're not only protecting personal data, but you are also ensuring that your organization's integrity is not tarnished in any way. And as I mentioned earlier, non-compliance actually has huge consequences for the GDPR. Specifically, it's a 20 million euros fine or 4% of your global turnover in penalties. So this is what non-compliance with the GDPR can cost you. And this is actually something that's really important. So it's a really comprehensive data protection compliance act that has been introduced in the European Union. So yeah, the GDPR is actually something that you need to focus on. And okay, thank you, Victor. You've actually mentioned that it's 25th May 2018. I had a sudden confusion about whether it was May or March. So yeah, the GDPR is coming into play on 25th May 2018, and there are a few things that you need to do in order to make sure that as an exchange administrator, you can help comply with the GDPR. So yeah, to pass GDPR audits, here are a few things that you can do. So one thing that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you do is locate messages based on keywords in their content. So I will be getting into that in the last 5 minutes of today's webinar. But before that, so the GDPR, it requires you to keep track of personal data that is exchanged in your organization. So if any personal data is sent in the form of attachments, and you need to figure out if one particular attachment has been sent by some user in your organization, you can actually use Exchange Reporter Plus in order to find out which particular user sent it. So you can locate the message, you can see the subject of the message, see who sent the message, who received the message, and so on. So Exchange Reporter Plus helps you with that. And of course, to pass the GDPR audit, you can do this particular thing where you look at the kind of messages that are being exchanged in your organization. And then another thing that you need to do is track the changes to mailbox permissions, because as I said, this is going to be a recurring theme throughout every compliance mandate that we discuss, because you need to make sure that some unauthorized user doesn't suddenly have permissions over an important mailbox. And then you need to look at emails that have been deleted or moved, because the email retention clause of the GDPR says that emails containing personal data need to be retained, or you just need to make sure that they haven't been deleted or moved across mailbox folders in your organization's mailboxes. You need to look at if any person other than the owner of a mailbox tried to access a particular mailbox. And finally, you need to see or you need to know when any change has happened to critical components in your organization, because you need an instant notification to make sure that you fix any kind of issue that happens in your organization before your end users notice. So these were all the compliance audits that we discussed today. So I had given you the minimum requirements of each of the compliance mandates, industry standards, and I also told you what you can do as an exchange administrator in order to ensure that you are compliant with those mandates. Yeah. So we discussed all of that. Now let's move on to the best practices for compliance. So we should be ending the webinar in maybe the next 10 minutes. In this slide, in the next few slides, or maybe just a slide rather, it'll take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I will give you certain best practices that you can follow irrespective of which compliance you are trying to comply with. So these are some of the best practices that most of the internet compliance gurus have mentioned so far, and I've just collated all of them for you. So the very first thing you can do is archiving, because archiving is actually something that's important, and most compliance mandates actually call for archiving, and there's at least a minimum of 10 years that some of them call for. I was talking about email retention, but archiving is also going to help you out in the long run. So you need to put archiving at the top of your list, because archiving should be done and it should be done in a way that prevents users from deleting their emails, because if they go on and delete their emails and then later on they are embroiled in some kind of investigation, you need to bring up the emails again. So do archiving in a way that prevents users from deleting their emails. Make sure that both inbound and outbound emails are archived in real time, because this also prevents users from mass deleting any emails. So some organizations, of course, go with the secure offsite archive, and ideally, administrators will be managing this offsite archive, and this is, of course, going to lessen data destruction or data tampering from happening, because administrators are in charge of the offsite archive too. So archiving is, of course, one best practice that you can follow. Create detailed reports for your auditors, obviously. So if you are trying to become compliant, this is something that you must already be familiar with. And most of you are probably already struggling with PowerShell in order to generate complex reports, because you need to give your auditors detailed reports. They are going to ask you questions like, okay, who had access to this important mailbox? You need a report that says, okay, so here's what happened, and these were the mailboxes that were accessed by a person who did not own the mailbox, and so on. So this kind of detailed information needs to be handed over to your auditors in a clear-cut format, and this is where a tool such as Exchange Reporter Plus would help you out, because we actually let you generate comprehensive reports on various aspects regarding data security, email security in your organization. Third one, very self-explanatory. I'm sure any of your spouses would know this too. You need to have measures in place in order to avoid data leaks. So this is obviously self-explanatory. It's something that people usually know, but I'm going to say it anyway because it needs to be said. There were so many cyber threats, so many data leaks in 2017, and it's 2018, and experts are saying, security experts keep saying that it's only going to get worse. So you need to have measures in place in order to avoid data leaks. And as an exchange administrator, something as simple as keeping track of permissions in your organization is going to help you out, because some random user, some rogue user in your organization could gain access to an important mailbox and they could leak confidential data. Your company could lose a deal because we weren't keeping an eye on the permission changes. So keep an eye on permission changes, find out what kind of non-owner mailbox logons have happened in your organization. And another thing that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you out with is it lets you see what kind of attachments have been sent by the users in your organization. So if someone has indeed leaked confidential data, and if you are trying to figure out who leaked it, if the leak has happened, and your reputation is probably suffering a little because of it, but if you, for an internal audit or an internal investigation, if you want to figure out who exactly was involved in the data leak, you can find that out using Exchange Reporter Plus. But anyway, you need to have measures in place in order to avoid data leaks. And then the fourth one, this particular best practice is something that is commonly mentioned by compliance experts. Add a disclaimer statement. Your emails should have, they probably already do, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Your emails need to have a disclaimer statement at the end of the email, because you need to tell your recipients about your organization's policy. You need to tell them about the nature of the email, and things such as that. Yeah, because it puts the responsibility solely on the recipients, because they need to act responsibly. They need to ensure that they don't reveal any of the improperly disclosed information. You don't want them to release any of the information, so you are just adding a disclaimer to the bottom of your email that says, okay, so this is our organization's policy. And disclaimers are not going to guarantee compliance for you, but legally speaking, they do help out in some cases in case there is any security violation in your organization. And finally, the final best practice that I'm going to offer to you is about data protection policies. Have a proper information security policy or a data protection policy in your organization, because this tells you, or this gives an idea about your organization's data classification framework. So this is going to be especially important if any kind of information is going to be transmitted insecurely, because you need to have data protection policy in place in order to decide that certain information is not transmitted insecurely, right? And by transmitted, I'm of course referring to emails, because we are primarily focused on Exchange today. So these are a bunch of best practices that I believe would help you out a little. And of course, we discussed 5 compliance mandates. If there are any regional or your country's specific compliance mandate that you'd like us to discuss, or if it is something you'd like Exchange Reporter Plus to help with, you can always reach out to us, because we are constantly looking for new feature requests, and we actually listen to your feature requests. So if a number of you want us to group certain reports of Exchange Reporter Plus in order to help you comply with certain compliance mandates that we haven't yet mentioned, you can always tell it to us and we will work our best, try our best to get it done. So there's that. Past compliance audits using Exchange Reporter Plus. So we've reached the last 5 minutes of today's webinar, where I am going to be giving you a quick demo about Exchange Reporter Plus, and I'll probably be showing you a few reports that I kept mentioning throughout the webinar. Yeah, because I kept saying things like you can locate messages based on keywords in their content. So I'll show you how exactly Exchange Reporter Plus lets you do that. I'll show you how you can audit permission changes using Exchange Reporter Plus, and also how you can audit non-owner mailbox logon. So these are 3 key things that almost every compliance mandate that we discuss seem to ask for. So all these 3 reports I will be showing you in the next 5 minutes. But before that, this is what Exchange Reporter Plus is. So Exchange Reporter Plus is Manage Engine's solution for messaging environments. And right now we help you audit, monitor, and report on your Exchange servers, your on-prem servers and Exchange Online. And we will soon also be adding Skype for Business. So Exchange Reporter Plus will be your go-to solution in order to monitor and audit your messaging infrastructure. So that's Exchange Reporter Plus. It's a reporting tool, primarily a reporting tool. So it has over 300 unique reports, and it also has an alerting functionality. So you can receive instant alerts. So this is something that's going to help you out with compliance mandates, because this is again another thing that I kept mentioning. You need instant notifications about any kind of data breach, or if there's any problem with emails, any critical changes to your servers, Exchange servers, and Exchange databases, Exchange Reporter Plus is going to give you an alert about it. So that's something that we are going to discuss, and I will be switching to the product screen soon. But before that, we discussed 5 key mandates today, and these are all the industry standards that Exchange Reporter Plus also helps you comply with. Once again, this is just for the exchange aspect of these industry standards. So there are 5 compliance mandates available here. So let me quickly switch to the product screen. I have it open right here, and but it has been open for quite a while. Anyway, so this is Exchange Portal Plus. I've clicked login, but we're also facing a little network connectivity issues, so it might be a little slow right now. So please just bear with me. But anyway, Exchange Reporter Plus. It helps you do 3 key things, as you can see from this tray that keeps scrolling. It first gives you reports or helps you fetch statistics on mailboxes and so on. It helps you monitor, it helps you track and audit certain aspects of your Exchange environment. And very soon it'll help you do all of this for Skype for Business too. So far we are helping you with Exchange servers and Exchange Online. Okay, this is taking way too long. So let's see which one's faster. So anyway, I chose these 5 mandates to discuss today because these are also the mandates that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you comply with. So what we've done is we've grouped some of the reports that we have available under each of these compliance categories. So you can just go take a look at these reports, download them, export them, email them to your stakeholders and auditors easily. So that's something that you can do using Exchange Reporter Plus. Anyway, so as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 key tabs in Exchange Reporter Plus. The very first tab is going to help you report on various aspects of your Exchange environment. We are going to help you audit various aspects of your Exchange environment. And finally, you can monitor the key components and protocols in your Exchange environment. So these are all the things that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you out with. And finally, we have logged in, and I have no idea why we keep facing these issues. But anyway, let's just wait for this to load. Yeah. So something that I repeatedly kept talking about as I was waiting for the screen to load was these 3 tabs. We have reporting, auditing, and monitoring. So earlier we were supporting just on-prem Exchange servers, which is why we have these 3 tabs. And when we added Exchange Online, instead of adding it under these main tabs, we added it as a whole new tab called Exchange Online. So under Exchange Online, you can actually report on and audit your Exchange Online environment very easily. So that's something that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you with. I have no idea why this keeps doing that. We also have a demo machine that you can access if you're interested. But anyway, it's finally loaded, kind of. As soon as you log into Exchange Reporter Plus, you have a dashboard which gives you intuitive information about certain important aspects of your Exchange environment. So it shows you in details about server storage usage. There are other things such as organization traffic summary, like you can see how many messages have been sent and received in your organization. You can see what kind of server traffic is present in your organization, and so on. So these are all the things that Exchange Reporter Plus shows you through its dashboard. In the reporting tab, you can use this tab to report on certain key components. And by key components, I mean components such as mailboxes. So it helps you report on mailboxes. It helps you look at OWA and active sync. So if you want to find out who the inactive active sync users are in your organization, you can do that using Exchange Reporter Plus. It has a whole bunch of email traffic reports. Like seriously, we have a lot of email traffic reports that help you monitor email traffic in real time. So if anyone is exchanging emails with an external email domain, you can actually find that out using Exchange Reporter Plus. I mentioned undelivered emails when we were discussing one of the compliance mandates. I believe it was HIPAA. So you can actually use the undelivered emails report of Exchange Reporter Plus in order to find out which emails were not delivered in the particular time period that you choose. So these are all the things that you can look at using Exchange Reporter Plus. You can monitor your organization, your public folders, and this is the category that we're looking for, but I'll come to that later. Auditing tab. So the auditing tab is going to help you audit your Exchange event logs. You don't have to run PowerShell scripts anymore, believe it or not, but this product is actually going to give you all the information that a PowerShell script can also give. And as you can see, some things that I already mentioned are present here, such as the non-owner mailbox logon report, overall mailbox permission changes, and so on. The monitoring tab is basically going to help you monitor various aspects of your Exchange organization, various key components such as your database availability groups, your servers, your databases, and so on. And finally, there's the Exchange Online tab, which is going to help you report on and audit your Exchange Online environment. So everything that we help with, okay, so we haven't configured an Office 365 tenant, but anyway, everything that we help you do with on-prem servers, we also help you do in Exchange Online. So there's that. That was my quick, briefest demo about Exchange Reporter Plus. So let's talk about compliance. So one report that you can see in common under all of these compliance mandates. So we've basically grouped all the reports that help you comply with each of these mandates under each particular category. And one thing that almost all 5 of these mandates have is the non-owner mailbox logon report. And this report is important because it helps you discover which user who is not an owner has tried to access a particular mailbox. It shows you the name of the mailbox, the server name, the time at which this access happened, which user tried to access the mailbox. That's what we mean by caller username. What was the email address of the user? What event ID was used? And what was the logon type? So these are all the things that we usually provide with Exchange Reporter Plus. So that's something that you can do with Exchange Reporter Plus, non-owner mailbox logon. And then another report that I kept mentioning was the mailbox permission changes report. So if you take a look at the left-hand side, there is something called mailbox permission changes, and there's a report named overall mailbox permission changes. Once again, this is something else that is going to help you comply with a variety of mandates. So you need to know if any unscrupulous permission change has happened in your organization. So this report shows you the name of the user who brought about the permission change, what was the name of the mailbox, the server name, the time at which the permission change happened, which user suddenly has access to a mailbox. You can see any remarks. So if any permission change has occurred, what exactly happened? Were access control entries added or removed? How many access control entries were added or removed? So these are all the remarks that this column includes. You can see details about the old value and the new value. What do we mean by that? Old value is the list of access control entries that were available earlier before this particular permission change happened. So it shows you the security principles and the permissions that were present earlier. And if you close this and take a look at new value, it shows what the difference is. So if any access control entry has been added, you can just take a look at this particular table, the new value, and figure out exactly what happened, exactly what permission change had happened in your organization. So yeah, so that's how this particular report works. And finally, I told you that I will also be showing you this third report, which has to do with isolating messages based on content keywords. So let's quickly take a look at that and we can wrap up today's webinar. Oh, I have those right here. So this is another report that Exchange Reporter Plus helps you with. So we have a bunch of reports called content reports, which help you locate messages based on certain things. So you can see any kind of messages. You can locate messages based on keywords present in their subject line. You can locate messages based on keywords in the body of the email. Or if you want to find out if any PDF files have been exchanged or if any media files, let's go with media now. If there are any emails that have been exchanged which contain installation files, exe files or media files which just occupy too much space on your Exchange servers, you can actually track that using Exchange Reporter Plus using this particular report. Attachments by file name. If you know the name of the attachment, you can actually use this report to locate the attachment. If you know the extension of the attachment, that is, if it were an installation file, an exe file, or a media file, you can actually locate it using Exchange Reporter Plus, and also based on file size. But the one report that I'm actually going to show you is this, messages by subject keyword. So let me click on that, and this is just a test setup. So let's just hope that this report has data, but this is ideally what the report should do. It shows you all the messages. Oh yeah, it has data. So I'll just explain it to you with the report. So it shows you the name of the mailbox. It shows you the folder name which contained that particular keyword. It shows you what the subject of the message was. So this is something that we've set up right now for this particular webinar. So we are looking for any message that contains test in the subject line. So it shows you the subject of the message. It shows you who sent the message, who received the message, the time at which the message was received, what was the size of the message, and if it had any attachment, it also shows you the name of the attachment and the size of the attachment. So I can sense your question here. I've just shown you an existing report, but how do you build this for a particular subject keyword that you want? So Exchange Reporter Plus lets you do that too, and let me quickly show you how. So you just need to click on create new report, and you just go ahead and create a new report, right? Let's call it messages with compliance. So this is just, I'm just showing this to you for demonstrative purposes. I'm pretty sure none of you are going to search for messages that have compliance in their subject lines. Yeah, messages with compliance in their subject lines. This is what we are going to look for today. Select report type. So we are going to be searching through all the emails in your organization, which is why the category that we are looking for is mail search. So let's choose mail search. Choose the mailboxes for which you want this particular report to be run. I'm going to go ahead and select all the mailboxes that we have available in this test setup. Click OK. Gathering interval, I want data to be gathered immediately. So I'm going to leave it at immediately. Folder name. Do you want this report to be run just for specific folders, or can it be run for all folders? I want it to be done for all the folders, so I'm going to leave it at that. And then you can customize the report. Do you want to do this based on keywords in the subject, or keywords in the body, or based on the file name or the file extension? So I said I wanted it based on subject. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose message subject and type compliance. So you can always add more filters here. So if you want all the messages that have compliance in the keyword and compliance as an attachment file name, you can always do that. But I don't want that right now, but I'm just mentioning it to you as an option. Yeah. So all you have to do is go ahead and click create, and this is going to be created. So right now it is not happening, but anyway, you get the picture. Hold on, if we go to custom reports, the report should actually be there. So these are all reports that I had created in earlier webinars that we had a few days back. So I wanted to look for messages that had the keyword lottery in the subject line. So you can just click on the report, and if any messages, I'm pretty sure this won't have data because this was a test setup, but oh, okay, it actually happened, and they put my email address in it. Okay, so this is all dummy data, but anyway, you get the picture. So the report, oh, our report is also here. So I'm sorry about the issues that we're facing, but anyway, let me quickly click on it. This is not going to have data right now, but the lottery one that I was just showing to you actually had data. So it shows you which mailbox had the particular email, which folder was this particular email present in, what was the subject line. So this is exactly what we searched for in the workshop that I conducted maybe last week. So yeah, anyway, it shows you the subject line, who sent the message, for which they've brilliantly put my name. It shows you who received the message. It shows you at which time or which date the message was received, what was the size of the message, and if any attachments were present, what was the file name and the size. So that's how this report works. And once data gathering is over, the report that we just created is also going to have data if any email was sent that had compliance in the subject line. So do you see how exactly this is going to help you out if you want to comply with any industry mandate? Because the GDPR actually wants you to keep an eye on what kind of attachments are being included in emails. And that's something that Exchange Reporter Plus actually helps you out with. So there's that. So we saw that in today's webinar. That was just a quick demo about Exchange Reporter Plus, and I went into detail about three particular features of Exchange Reporter Plus, but we have so much more than just those three particular features, and I have a couple of people actually in the questions pane who've said they want a proper demo of the product. So you guys can always reach out to me at shruti@manageengine.com, and I'll also add the email address of our support team to the chat box. So I'll just send that here. Hold on. It's support@exchangereporterplus.com. So if you reach out to us, I've added it through the chat box. So if you reach out to the support team, or you can always reach out to me if you have any questions or if you'd like a proper demo about the product, we'll show you how exactly the tool works, not just for compliance, but for so many other things that you may require to do in your Exchange environment. So we will help you out with that, and do reach out to me if you have any questions at all. And for the questions that have already been asked through the questions pane, I will be addressing them in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So you don't have to worry. All your queries are going to be addressed right now. But before that, there were 5 key compliance mandates that we saw today, and we saw the basic intro about each of those mandates and what as an exchange administrator, what are the things that you can do in order to make sure that you are compliant with these mandates. So these were all the things that we saw today. And finally, I gave you a quick demo about Exchange Reporter Plus. So yeah, there's that. I hope you guys were able to learn something of value. You have something to take away from the 45 minutes that you spent in today's webinar, because I really hope that this was actually time well spent for you. It would mean a lot to me if you were able to get something out of this webinar. So thank you very much for attending, and I'm really glad that you guys have been such a great audience and you've all actually been pretty interactive. So thank you so much for that, and I hope you have a great day today.